Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joanna Kujawa, Joanna for you. Welcome to my channel and my Goddess News blog. Today we have a great pleasure to speak with Susan Demeter, who is the author of The Cosmic Witch. So this is going to be a very intriguing guest. And I'm just reading from Susan's biography in her book. She's also conducted scholarly research on behalf of the Defense Studies Department of the Canadian Armed Forces College in Toronto. So I'm already kind of previewing that we are going to discuss the UFOs as well, because I assume that this is the connection here, right? And also the Kostler Parapsychology unit at the University of Edinburgh. And wow. So I'm really actually very excited about it because I think it launches also the channel in a slightly different direction, and I love to learn from other people. And like you, I think I really enjoy the combination of good research with launching this research into more alternative fields. Right? Because sometimes, although I'm open to channeling and all of these kind of things, sometimes the scholar in me is kind of cringing because I think, okay, how can we validate this experience? And I'm sorry, I apologize to everyone now, but I'm yet to meet a clairvoyant, for example, who made sense to me, you know, when I went with my personal things. But I actually believe that this is possible, that there are good clairvoyants, you know, there are good channelers and so on, but I never really met anyone yet, right? But I really love this kind of line of research, the combination of the unusual, the alternative, and proper research. So that's why I was really excited to hear about your book, and I heard about it on actually Diana Pasuka's page, who is the author of now very famous book, The American Cosmic. So, Susan, why The Cosmic Witch? Because it's a very intriguing title.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me as a guest. I'm so excited to finally see you and speak to you in person. Well, you know,
as close as we can nowadays to get into person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Pleasure to
so to answer your question, why the Cosmic Witch title, it's because this is how I grew into my own spirituality. Cosmic Witch is a moniker that I've taken upon myself and my identity because for me, it best describes my own spiritual practice, my form of witchcraft. And I wanted to, with my book, not only just explore traditions within witchcraft, and goddess, goddess worship, but how modern women today can embrace the archetype of the witch or being a witch, and not just women, I should say. My book is very inclusive to all gender, non-gender, you know, it's for everybody really. But the idea is that we can form our own spiritual path. And in the case of the witch, that's almost always channeling in that divine feminine energy. So the goddess. And I talk about the cosmic mother, which is what I refer to as the greater goddess, which there's many goddesses that fit within that. And so that's where my book is at. But Cosmic Witch is because of personal experiences I've had and my own interests, from astrology to astronomy to starseed tarot, things that harnessing the celestial energies, more what you might consider more mainstream Wicca witchcraft, drawing down the moon, bringing in that lunar energy, working with that. So for me, this is all about the greater cosmos. So Cosmic Witch. That's who
I understand. So actually, would you call yourself a practicing witch?
Yes, I am. I'm solitary. I don't work within a coven. I have done magical things with other witches, but because my own spiritual practice is very eclectic, and I work with different goddesses and gods and the elementals and the spiritual beings that are within my own nature, particularly now that I'm here in Italy. I work with local spirits. So it's a very eclectic, unique type of practice that I find personally spiritually enriching, and it's the driving force within my day and who I am as a person. So
I can completely relate to it, and I think all viewers can relate to this as well, because my spiritual path is also, very eclectic, and I combine like Gnosticism and esoteric Hinduism, and when I was doing research on Mary Magdalene, also some pagan goddesses. What's pagan anyway? It's just such a authoritarian division between religion and paganism, like as if it was any different, right? Like one is better than the other, when in fact it's not, right? It's just a different form of belief. So sometimes even naming it is very kind of patriarchal and hierarchical, right? Like there's a pagan, Hindu goddesses, are they pagan goddesses? I would, how do they are goddesses? So would you please tell me with which goddesses you connect? You said that you connect, if it's not a secret, that you connect with specific goddesses. So what would they be?
I would say, well, I would say in general, I refer to the goddess as the cosmic mother, but in practice, I would say that the goddesses that, and I can work with many goddesses, but the goddesses that are primarily who I am interested in are Diana, Hecate, the goddess of magic, and of course, I am very interested in. Oh gosh, my mind is going blank all of a sudden. Diana wants me to focus on Diana, so I'm gonna say Diana, Hecate, and yes, of course, after my own moniker, which is Demeter.
Oh,
so
that's right.
And Persephone.
And Persephone, of course, because they are connected. So wow, so this is the connection with really, I see now also the connection with paganism, because they are very earthy goddesses, like Demeter, right, for example. So we're connected to nature spirits. And I actually, although I love nature, and I always loved nature as a child especially, and now it came back to me. Only recently I opened to what one author talks about, the elementals, the spirits of nature, right? She calls them elementals. Another Canadian scholar, I forgot her name, and once I opened up to them, I started to see them. Isn't it interesting, right? So it's like first the magic of childhood allows for this, and then I became all in my mind, and I unfortunately still am to a large degree because of my profession. And then I opened up, I said, what if it's possible? And I started to see nature spirits, which was returning almost like to the magic of childhood. So it's also, I think, how we maybe focus our perception. Do you think so? That ability to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I talk about it in the book as like seeing with the mind and the lenses or the eyes of the witch, of seeing the world in a very symbolic sense, opening ourselves up to different conscious. And of course, I have a very animistic view of the universe. I feel that everything is sentient and conscious, and that we're all part of the greater cosmic mother. So to me, absolutely. When we're children, we're not given these ideas that this cannot exist. This is not part of the physical reality. That you cannot think this way. So we see things and we imagine, and we're part of magic. And that unfortunately is taken away from a lot of us in adulthood, in early adulthood, where we're told, oh, these things aren't real, or you're just using your imagination, as if the imagination is not part of us or who we are. And I feel that parts of this have led to the disenchantment of people in society, maybe not necessarily the world and nature, but people. And you see where this leads us. In the current state, not just meaning pandemic, but, imbalances in different human populations, and how we can, who is thriving more than others, and how we treat our animals and our nature.
And also this connection from nature, and something that I'll launch later with my blogs, the obsession of transhumanism. right? Which is it's actually very scary for me. You know, like I really don't like humanity to go in the direction of artificial intelligence being merged with, you know, humanity and so on. So I think we are moving in a dangerous direction in this way. But just as a kind of personal confession, when I started to write about Mary Magdalene, I started to connect not only with her, but also with in Western history, because I really explore esoteric Hinduism and Hindu goddesses. And I started to explore and connect with goddesses such as Isis and Inanna. And actually, it was a very powerful but almost scary experiences. You know, when I started to call upon their names, so we were very friendly and very, you know, open, and I would like to think that we are friends. You know, I almost had this kind of voice: do you really want to awaken this power within yourself? You know, because
Yes.
this kind of really almost forgotten feminine power, right? Which comes, like both goddesses come with magic, lots of magic, Isis especially, you know, and Inanna, we know less about Inanna because she's a Sumerian goddess. But I personally started to connect with them, and it was a very kind of eye-opening, let's put it, experience. You know, you can call upon them, right? And you can connect with them. Still.
You can absolutely connect with them still. And in some ways they don't, like for instance, as an example here, there was a temple of Isis here in Bologna, Italy, that later was built upon early Christian chapels, and then it sort of morphed all these buildings in this place called Santo Stefano. But they do, and within one of the churches, they actually list that, you know, here is where this underground river was, and this is built on top of a temple of Isis. And I'm thinking, well, people do go there, and they do still make offerings and worships to the goddess in the name of the Blessed Virgin. But a goddess is a goddess, and not necessarily does the goddess, you know, need you to call her exactly by name, but you're going there and you're venerating the divine feminine. Yes. And so this still is ongoing. It might have changed. It might be a different name or a different goddess to someone else, but the veneration and the feeling of love are still there. You know, I'm a witch, and I view myself as a very pagan. But my house, for instance, here, I live in a very rural village, mountain village in Italy. And most of the houses here already have built-in altars with for Mary. And our house, when we bought it, it has an altar to Mary. And at first I thought, well, you know, what am I going to do with this? Like, I'm not Catholic. But then I thought, you know what, this is beautiful. And this was somebody's altar that was created. And you know what, and I can live with this. She is a lovely, I wish they would deify her again. And within the Catholic, if I was Catholic, I'd be pushing for this, but I'm not. But at the same point, you know, I view her as a beautiful representation of a mother goddess, and so I have no problem with keeping her altar on the outside of the house, even though I'm not Catholic. But to me, she's a goddess.
But yeah, that's very beautiful. And although I'm lapsed Catholic and I cannot really call myself Catholic anymore, I must say that I do love, you know, the veneration of the divine feminine. My argument is that, you know, it is a very limiting archetype for women, but
yes,
the way it is portrayed as the virginal kind of mother and so on, the way she's interpreted. But I do love this part. I really do love this part. So if you don't mind, I would like to move on right now to your parts of your book that talk about your early experience in parapsychology, because I would like to move into this territory as well. You know, you gave some examples also when you were a child, I think, when you had experiences.
Yes, I did. And I in the book, I look at them, I examine them as an initiatory experience. So all of these strange experiences, which continued on into my adulthood at various phases, I consider them an initiation into a reality of magic. So when I was a child, I talk in my book about some experiences that are more dreamlike, or I can't really, because of the age, perhaps pin down whether it was more imaginal or more within the realms of reality. But there is one experience I talk about with having with a little being I'll call it a being because it looked human to me, but probably wasn't human. So in the book, I talk about being a child and being with my parents and going to look at a new build home. My mother at the time was pregnant with my younger sister, and they were looking to expand their house. And so they brought me along to this new construction that was like a model home that they were interested in purchasing. And while they were there with the real estate agent, they let me, I think it was maybe about 6, 7 years old, somewhere in there, I was young. They let me go and explore the house. And so I did, and I remember finding this bedroom upstairs that had skylights. And as a child, I'd never seen skylights before. And I was like, oh, this is really, this is really cool. I want this to be my bedroom. I was thinking, I'm so excited. And when I went to turn around and go back downstairs to where my parents were with the real estate agent, I turned around and I saw in the corner of the room this man, this humanoid little man looking at me, solid as it could be another child or another person or whatever, standing there. But I immediately knew what I was seeing shouldn't be. Okay. And it frightened me. And it stuck with me. It's still something I can recall very easily in my mind now, because it really, really struck with me that I'm seeing something outside of what is normal, I guess, consensus reality for all of us, that this shouldn't be. And then it was afterwards, after that experience, I started having more similar experiences within my home. They would frighten me often. I would sleep with my little stuffed animals would be guarding me around my bed. I'd set them up because occasionally these beings would pop up and they'd be sitting on my bed, and I'd be like, and I would close my eyes and and think, oh my goodness, I'm seeing something, but no, it was still there. And it really, really scared me. And I thought, because I guess the only real exposure I had to paranormal things maybe was Scooby-Doo at that point. And, I figured that these things were ghosts, and they scared me. And I it's not something I could talk with my friends at school about, and it was not something I could really confide in my parents about. Because I knew that it was happening, but it wasn't real, but it was real. But so this is where I was at with it, but they scared me. And then at one point during one of these experiences where this being, I guess you could call it a gnome looking being with very green skin, sitting on the side of my bed, looking very frightening, a wolf appears. Okay. And the wolf also seems to me like a very solid, could be a dog. Touching the wolf would be like touching a dog, like a real solid thing is there. And it's communicating with me, and it's telling these beings, get lost. Okay.
Wow.
Leave this little. Now, eventually, as I got, into, puberty and into teenagehood, these experiences stopped. And as I became in my later teens and my early young adult, I was thinking to myself, well, I came to the idea that the wolf was something I created out of my own mind. Like the wolf was a representation of myself. Of course, as a young adult, you start thinking, well, all of this, I must have been, because I am a creative person, this must have been all childhood imagination. There wasn't any reality to this. I must have dreamed this all up in my head, until I started having experiences as an adult. And then I thought, no, I know in my heart, I was having an experience with something strange, something magical, something very weird, it's just, I can't explain. And 100%, to be honest with you, I still don't have an exact explanation that would satisfy everybody as to what was going on, and to the experiences I've had. They're very personal. But in my book, I explore them as, this is the initiation to say, hey, there's this consensus reality that we live in, that we all go about our day and our business and that. But there's a whole bunch of other things going on, maybe in another dimension, or they're right alongside us, or from wherever, that we experience. And many, 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 many people have these experiences. and they just don't talk about them, or if they do, it's only with a trusted friend or that, and that they really can shape the way we view reality itself. So that's where my book and my spirituality driven by these experiences.
This is very interesting because I couldn't agree more with you. But my first question actually is, why do you think they wanted to scare you, or why were you scared? Why do you think? Because if a child is scared, maybe it's not because it was beyond the regular perception, because children are quite open-minded in this way. But did you feel, why were you scared? Why do you think they were malevolent in some way, you think? Or
they never harmed me as far as I know and remember, but it was just because they were shocking, and to me they looked stern and not friendly, and I was afraid. And you know, because they were not part of something that I would, not all the experiences were super frightening. I mean, I do talk in the book as well about this little blue boy that I would go on these flights with, almost obviously in a shamanic sense.
Yes.
And we would speak in a strange language with each other, and we would fly through the cosmos, and this was a fun, thrilling experience. Yes. But the other experiences, which seemed a little bit more solid, a little bit more part of this reality that we were in, seemed very menacing. And like I said, I assumed that they were ghosts. And I think that probably that came from the idea of pop culture and television and what I was exposed to. And I thought, I'm living in a haunted house. I'm being haunted, kind of thing. So
if you don't mind, I would like to share something here as well, because as you say, it's very difficult to share this kind of experiences with other people. But for example, perhaps because I was brought up as a Catholic and my family was very open, and I think Catholics are very open to supernatural, whether they want to admit it to or not.
Yes.
And when in my family, somebody died, everybody, there would be an uncle or auntie that they had a dream, that the grandfather came and tell them I'm fine. Or we would actually, when my grandfather died, we heard him coughing, when he was already, because he was gone because he was sick. And, there are all of this kind of special experiences. So I was all open to this. But when my beloved grandmother, before she died, she told me that, when I die, I'm going to come and visit you, just you. And I said, oh, why are you saying this? I was completely freaked out. I was a teenager, like, what? And then, but she did. And, I remember the reason you said you saw them sitting on your bed, because I remember I would wake up in the middle of the night and she would be sitting in the corner of my bed, the way, like when she was already old, in this kind of, dress like very much like an older Italian traditional woman, and she would be sitting there. I could clearly see her profile, and it's not like I wanted to see her. In fact, I was terrified because I was just a regular teenager, not very spiritual at this stage, and so I just basically recognized her, and I kind of set up basically to get closer to her, and then she just like if she was made of fog, but it happened many times. Once I was already living in Paris, and I had a very challenging experience in front of me, and I was dreaming that I'm actually in the room in which I actually was, and that she was lying next to me, and she says, you have to get up now because you'll miss your appointment. And I woke up, and so this, how do you explain this, right? And
exactly.
Yeah, so it's just like your experiences, but I believe that we do not share this. We all have, as you said, perceptions of these other realities which are present in our present reality, whatever we call reality, but they are so subtle that somehow we don't know how to relate to them ourselves. So even a couple of days ago, I had a very beautiful experience just before the sunrise, and I wanted to share it with my husband, and even with him, it took me 2 days to actually say something. And I said, it will sound kind of strange and new agey, but I had this experience. I was apologizing for an experience, and this is really bizarre, don't you think so? That we somehow lack the language and almost without our own experience, right?
Exactly. Well, many of these experiences, they defy the language that we have. Sometimes it's better to express in art, which I do with my own art, my feelings and experiences, than it is to try and describe it to another person, because they're also very personalized often. And then secondly, in society, at least in Western society, a lot of this stuff has become taboo. So if you discuss these things and you're worried, like, are people going to think, I'm mentally ill? And through the parapsychology and exploring other people's experiences, I like to reassure people that, mentally ill people really often don't realize that they're mentally ill. If you're questioning your sanity, you're likely a sane person. I mean, people have these strange experiences, but because they're not what we expect as a normal experience, they can be frightening, or they can be very difficult to express to another person. And I also find that with these experiences, often they can be driven by the sacred, and they change people's complete paradigm as to how they view reality and the cosmos and our place in it as well. Many of these experiences are quite dramatic, or even if it's just like seeing strange lights, or absolutely having experiences with our deceased loved ones, our beloved dead, when they come and visit. I think it changes us, because we know, like, I've had similar experiences with my mother who's passed, my dad, a little bit more with my mom and my grandmother. And now as an adult, because I've accepted the reality of magic, so to speak, and ghosts and things like that, I do see occasionally other people's beloved dead, and strangers and things. So I do see ghosts, and more often now that I've accepted my spiritual practice, and it's become a daily thing for me. Not seeing ghosts, but my spiritual practice is daily. I keep my altar every day. I have more than one, and living a magical lifestyle, you invite more of this in, or you're more open to it, right? So.
And does it mean that you are not scared now when you see ghosts? Or is it still kind of confronting? Or is it confronting? No?
No, not usually. If I see them, there's a specific reason for it. I saw the house that we purchased. We drove through this village on the way to another destination in Italy. I wasn't speaking Italian at that point, but there was a sign that said "Vendesi" on it, which means for sale. And I didn't know that at the time. This was going back a few years ago. And so we're driving past this place. We stop, we walk into this courtyard, and I see this man standing there, and I knew he wasn't supposed to be there, and he's pointing at this sign. And I took a photograph of it. And a whole year passed, and we were at that point looking at houses, and I showed my husband this photo, of just the sign. It wasn't of the man. And he said, "Well, that's for sale." And I said, "Really? Well, let me tell you the background of why I took this picture, because we weren't looking for a house at the time." Wow. And sure enough, all this synchronicity sort of snapped into place, and we ended up in this house. Okay, it's got this beautiful view of this sacred mountain that was sacred to the early Christians and pagans and spiritual people around here. And later on, I found out from my neighbor. She said, "Oh, well, I was close to the family that lived there before you. The lady that sold it to us, her husband had passed a couple of years prior to that, and she showed me a picture, and it was him."
Oh, wow.
It was, yeah. And at that point I knew, well, he wanted us in this house. This house needed us, or something was guiding him to show this to me, because had I not seen it, I don't think I might have taken a picture of the house or the surroundings, but I took a picture specifically of that sign, not even realizing what the word meant. Just, there's this sign on this house, click. And then when we were looking for houses, I just happened to flip through these pictures and, oh, well, look at this.
That's amazing.
And so,
yeah.
Yeah, so that was driven by something, either the spirits within the land and house itself, or the former owner who wanted somebody, because he put so much work into this place, and I think he wanted someone who was going to love the house that he put so much work into. That's what I feel. So yeah.
This brings another thing to my mind, which is, we are talking about this difference in perception, opening up a field of perception, so to speak, right? To the magical or spiritual, however you want to call it, interdimensional, you know, whether you want to move towards more scientific language or parapsychological or spiritual language, right? But it's one and the same thing.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, because in my own book that now is going, with editors, I also kind of look into this possibility that it almost seems, it's a little bit like a conspiracy theory, that somehow human development was almost channeling the direction more of a rational mind, right? And that it somehow also led to the repression of the goddess, which is kind of a more feminine, and I'm not talking about gender, I'm talking about the energy, right? Like in Jung, both women and men have animus and anima, right? So it's not limited to women. But this kind of more holistic field of perception was kind of denied to us. And it may be we made this turn, of ancient Greece and so on, and we obviously, celebrate the philosophers, Plato, Socrates, and so on. But we somehow, something was lost, and this loss is somehow connected to the goddess. So it's not only the worship of a goddess, it's not only the worship of a feminine, but our own consciousness got limited because of that.
Yes, it's almost as if, the divine feminine or the mother figure was removed. So you're missing, the world is missing our mother. That's, how I feel is what's led us astray in many areas. We've moved away from our mother, from our planet, and there's a reason that she is called Mother Earth. So, and I do feel that that's the case. And it's also the idea of removing the body and the spirit, or separation of the body and the spirit, which I think is also part of the problem, and something, because you had mentioned transhumanism early on, and I have the same worries that you do. I don't even call it transhuman. I say it's posthuman. Whatever these beings will be, they're not. They might have a silicone body or whatever that's shaped like a human shape, but they will not be a human being, because I feel that our bodies play an intimate role in what makes us human. And I think we have gotten away from that, and that's part of the problem as well, is that we're not accepting of the spirit within our own body, and within the spirit within other bodies as well, and within all matter, right? So I also feel that is a big problem with removing the mother from the sacred.
From the mother, from the sacred, that's right. And also limiting our own field of perception only to a rational thinking, which is, very limited way of seeing things. It's, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, but it's very linear way of perception, right? So something beautiful was lost, and that's in what was lost actually was very essential, I believe, to a spiritual evolution and evolution as a species, and now we are going into this dark tunnel of, I really like how you coin it, posthumanism, posthumanism, did you say? Or
yes, posthuman. Yes, it's a
posthuman rather than transhuman, because it's not better, it's not more, it is basically there's no human left, or the human is left without a soul, right? It's just
exactly. Like, I mean, we can create something like this, and maybe there is a way to snap consciousness. If we look into consciousness studies, there may be a way for us to project our consciousness, or to, because I mean, obviously, if we look at it, if we think that we are, star seeds, or we're coming from the stars, that our bodies are made up literally of everything else that's made up in the universe. Well, then if we create these artificial bodies, They will also be from the star stuff because but they won't be human anymore. They won't have our heartbeats. They won't have our cells. They won't be able to, unless we program an algorithm, they're not going to be able to feel touch the way we do. These are all things that make us human. So whatever they may be, they may look like humans. They may have been programmed by humans, but they will be post-human. They will be something else. They will not be human. A machine cannot be fully human because it doesn't have our body. It doesn't have the same experience we do, you know, which is what makes us human.
So you connected with the body. I see, because it's a good new thought for me. So thank you for this. But I was thinking, when I'm thinking about it, I believe that our consciousness could not, I do not believe that our consciousness can be the same, even without the body in a machine, you know, however sophisticated, but something very subtle and very unique is going to be lost. And that's something maybe just as well our soul. So, you know, so I'm not sure, but I also like the idea of you that, you know, we are deeply connected to our bodies and our nature. And that's why I think it would be maybe just a good moment to discuss, you know, sexuality and spirituality as well, which is also very often associated with the worship of ancient goddesses. Because, and you talk a little bit also about it in your book, right?
I do. I talk about sacred sexuality. I talk about how society moved towards shaming sexuality, shaming what is a normal, healthy, for, you know, feelings towards wanting to, you know, and beyond procreation. It's the feeling of connecting with another human being, with other humans. And I do discuss that, and I discuss as well sexual magic, and how we can drive our magic with the energy I feel that is created through orgasm. I also put in some caveats too about, you know, when it comes to sexual, you know, sexual practices, as within, you know, different traditions, is to be very careful that, you know, what you're drawn to, that there isn't some sort of a hierarchy where someone is dictating to you how you should be doing and how you should be feeling with your body. Because in occult circles, you know, people have been taken advantage of while pursuing these. But getting back to it, yes, I do feel that there was a point in human history, certainly in early Christianity, in one of these branches of Christianity, where you have the separation of spirit, soul, and body, that came up with these notions that to be closer to the sacred, you must reject the body, and including, you know, bodily pleasure in that. And then you have these mythos that, you know, are really, you know, feminine sexuality is somehow bad or wrong, or, you know.
I know. I actually, even before I started Tantra, because later on I moved on to Tantra in my life, and, you know, esoteric Hinduism, which I studied in quite depth. But when I was still a good Catholic girl, and I was studying at the Pontifical Institute at the University of Toronto, and I was reading the letters of Saint Jerome, which is, or Saint Jerome, early 4th century Christian saint and father of the church, I think he's also called. And it was interesting to me, you know, how he perceived woman's body, and clearly he was a hot Italian man. Okay, and he struggled with his sexuality, and he projected it on women. So he's all of his aristocratic Roman ladies, you know, some of them very beautiful, and he would just ask them to smother themselves with, you know, with some dirt and wear some horrible clothes, simply because he wouldn't get turned on, basically, right? And then he says, I don't know what I'm doing wrong, because I like eat only 2 dates per day, and I live in a cave, and I still see naked dancers with naked breasts, and I actually had a really good laugh, you know, with them, because I thought, because it is just so stupid what you're doing, right? Like, why are
Exactly.
you denying yourself something that is, I'm not talking about like self-indulgence, but you know, the beauty of sexual connection, and you obviously you know, explored in a different tradition, but I explored in esoteric Hinduism, when actually it can fuel our spiritual evolution.
Absolutely. I do feel it does. And in fact, it's very interesting because as I'm living in Italy now and I'm coming across various magical practitioners, I do see a movement, particularly amongst younger women, for venerating Aphrodite. And she is, of course, the goddess of human sexuality and beauty and these things. And to me, it is beautiful in that to see that you know, younger women are embracing their bodies. They're not ashamed of their body anymore. You know, I mean, these are things that really have harmed societies,
Yes,
at least in the Western world. You know, they've really harmed society. You know, all this shaming and trying to put these unnatural dogma on what is something normal found within nature. You know.
So I'm a little bit of a conspiracy theorist here, because I think the repression of a field of perception and is connected somehow to the repression of a goddess, and the repression of sacred sexuality, and that sexuality as a tool for a spiritual evolution is done for the same reason. So I don't know who is doing it and why, but you know, obviously we have to reclaim it. And I'm very glad to hear that you have this experience also of young women reclaiming it. And you know, lots of books recently are being written about it and so on, the last 20 years especially, because people start to have a feeling, you know, that this is a perception of our sexuality, and the separation, this polarity between sexuality and spirituality is completely artificial in many ways, right? And there are only certain kind of esoteric fields in separate religions, you know, and movements that were exploring it, but in fear usually from being exposed as, you know, I don't know, perverts, you know, because asceticism was the day, you know, the word of the day. And now, so that's very interesting. But now I'd like us to move to something that I was really looking forward to as well. And this is your UFO experiences. Let's get into that. Because I actually lived in Toronto for 12 years. So when I was reading your book, I knew exactly where you had the experiences. So maybe you could like to, for our listeners and viewers, actually, would you like to recall some of the UFO experiences, and you know how it's changed your field of perception and maybe your spirituality as well?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think that my most important, and I've had more than one UFO experience, but I think the most important occurred when I was 23 years old, and I saw. Okay, well, I'll just set up the story a little bit for you. So it was late evening. And I'll never forget this. I was watching Elvira, Mistress of the Dark mystery movie, and my husband at the time was asleep. I had two small children; they were asleep, and my sister was over. She was asleep too, and I was watching because it was late evening, getting I think about 1 o'clock in the morning, November 4th. And we were watching this movie, me and my brother-in-law at the time. And the movie was coming to an end. And at the time, I was living on the 10th floor of a condominium building with big sliding glass doors to a terrace area that overlooked Lake Ontario. And you could see in the distance was the nuclear power plant, the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. And so it was my habit to make sure that the doors were all locked, because I was always worried what happens. You know, I was young at the time. If I slept in or something and one of the children opened the sliding glass doors, and, you know, so I was making sure that everything was safely locked up. And as I looked at the sliding glass, I saw this huge red light in the sky. And at first, the first split second thought is something is reflecting off the TV, because I had not seen something like that before. So I looked back and I realized, no, this wasn't anything to do with Mistress of the Dark movie. So I opened the door and I thought, what am I seeing out there? Because this was unusual. Okay, this was weird. So I go out and it's November, and you lived in Toronto, so you know November is cold. But I'm in my bare feet, my pajamas, and it's like this. It was something was drawing me. So I went out onto this balcony, and I see this thing, and it's there, and it's pulsing, and I'm thinking, what am I seeing? Like, this is huge, this big red thing in the sky, and immediately you start to discount in your own mind. Well, this is not an airplane. I'm not hearing sounds. This is not a helicopter, whatever. This is weird. So I called out to my brother-in-law. I said, come on out. You got to see this. I'm seeing something really weird. And he comes out and he's looking at it, and he kind of grabbed my arm and he said, I think we're seeing a UFO. What? Prior to this, obviously I had been exposed to the topic of UFOs, but this is even before X-Files, and it wasn't really something I was into. I was more into my own astrology at that time, and other spiritual practices and magical stuff, and that I wasn't into really UFOs. So here's this large light glowing in the sky. I'm seeing this and I'm thinking, what's going on? And at that point we were so excited because it seemed to vibrate, and what I saw was it seemingly imploded in on itself and then shot straight up into the sky. And I'm looking around to see that there was a roadway near where the condominium was. There was one car on the road. I thought, oh, someone must have seen this. What, obviously this thing. So the next morning, like, we had stayed up all night at this point. What did we see? What is this? This is so weird. Did we see a UFO? Was this the alien spaceship? So we checked the morning news, the newspapers, nothing. There was nothing at all about some red light in the sky, and I didn't know what to do about this. So, you don't really call the police and say, oh, I saw this strange light in the sky. They're going to say, well, there's a crime here. What are you, crazy? So, I left it there. Yeah, a few weeks later, I went to the Toronto Public Library and I checked out some books on UFOs, and I found an address for QFOS, which is the Center of UFO Studies in the United States. And it was a book by Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I had no experience at the time. So I wrote a big long letter to him saying, this is my experience. I don't know what to do with this. This is pre-internet age. This is 1990. So it's not like you go in the yellow pages or whatever, the old phone books, and looking up UFO. I didn't know who to talk to about this. So I wrote this letter out, and a few weeks later it came back, returned to sender, undeliverable. So the address didn't work anymore. And unbeknownst to myself, the author, Allen Hynek, had died a few years previous. So I kept the letter, and that's where it sort of sat for me until the more advent of, I had a computer at home by 1996, and was getting online, and then I think the first thing I typed into a search engine, I forget what they were, like dog pile. So this is pre-Google, typing in UFO to see what will come up. It never really left me, it never left me. And it was what I consider an initiatory experience as an adult, because then I had to reorient my whole thinking about, was I really imagining these little beings and these experiences as a child? Because I was fully awake. I had little kids at the time, so it wasn't like I was drinking or anything like that. Like, I was fully sober, and other than being maybe a little tired, staying up late to watch a horror film, I was within my full faculties, so I couldn't deny the experience at that point. And that's really, and it's interesting too, because I did talk to my dad. My dad was a professional scientist. He worked for the University of Toronto for a while, and he was a pilot. And I talked to my dad, and I said to him, Dad, I had this strange experience the other night. I don't know what it was. It was a UFO. And he said, you know what? If you're saying this is a UFO, he said, I believe you. And then he went on to tell me that in the 1950s in the Gulf of Mexico, while deep sea fishing, he also saw something that he said, I knew this wasn't something of ours, something that we had invented, or, you know, and he had also worked on the Identify Friend and Foe project for the Allies during the Second World War. He was part of that. So he was very well acquainted with strange things and anomalies in the sky and that. So he knew, but it was something that he had never told me prior to my telling him, you know, oh, I had this experience. And he absolutely was able to validate for me that I had an unusual experience and that it was okay. And it was fine that I told him. So I was able to then kind of go forward in exploring these topics with maybe the self-confidence that I might not have had if I didn't have a close family member saying, yeah, no, you know what, there is something to it, you know, that we don't know, you know. So that's
it's interesting how we are, you know, do not trust our own experiences, right? And we need always someone to validate it, right? It's not like I'm sitting at the table, I'm not asking anybody to validate it, right? And when something really unusual happens, or magnificent in some ways happens, and we question our own sanity. So this is actually when you were talking about your early childhood experience with paranormal experience, when you and your parents went to see the new house and there was a skylight and you saw this humanoid, and I immediately thought, was it an alien? But I was afraid to ask because you said, oh, it was kind of gnome light. So what now, after when we talk about seriously about UFOs, would you say that you think that it was perhaps some kind of experience related to UFOs, or you think it was more of from the sphere of magic and nature spirits and so on?
Well, I actually think that these things are all connected in some way. And I really encourage people that are interested in these subjects to check out, his book is now more than 50 years old, but Jacques Vallée's Passport to Magonia, which really, if you look through the folklore, fairy folklore and this sort of thing going back, and these various traditions going back centuries and centuries and centuries. Now, they don't speak of a technological civilization on another planet coming to visit, but when you strip away the story, the myth, it's the same, seemingly the same thing. So I would say yes. And when I use the word alien in general, when I'm writing or talking about alien, I use that in the very broadest sense, in that I think we are dealing with other intelligences or another intelligence that is potentially co-creating experiences with us. You know, now it's very difficult for most people to believe in a little fairy or, you know, I do, but for the general people. But the idea that there's life on other planets and it may be coming to visit may suit the epoch we're living in more, which is very science and technology driven. You're hard pressed to find someone who will not say, oh, there probably is some life somewhere out there in the cosmos, versus, you know, fairies that are living under a hill, you know, in the back lot of the forest, right? So, but it may in fact be the same thing. I don't know. I do think that there are different things going on, but the mechanism is most likely the same. So, and like I said, alien for me is in the broadest sense. For people that are familiar with UFOs, for instance, I saw something very similar to what a woman by the name of Rosa Lotti reported here in 1954 in Italy, in Tuscany, where she saw a spaceship. She had been doing her laundry and she was getting prepared to go to church. And she saw what she described as a small spaceship, and these beings hopped out, and they did not look like what we would know now as the gray alien, which is the popular depiction of an alien, the logos of the alien. These creatures she described as literally like little green men, like little gnomes. And they of all things, they stole her stockings. This woman had to say, these beings came and they stole my stockings. And you know what? When I hear UFO experiences and it's just like, oh, there's this little light in the sky and I watched it for about 3 seconds and I don't know what it is, I figure that's probably something, you know, misidentified. We all misidentify things. But when there's strange stories that surround these, but I saw this strange light in the sky, and then I went home and there was this large, strange rabbit that, sent me a telepathic message that was sitting on my driveway. That to me tells me, no, this is probably far more in line with what we would consider the phenomena or something, a mystical experience. Yes. And so my experiences with these little gnome-like beings that I thought at first were ghosts, but they were more gnome-like. I mean, some of them were blue, some of them were Caucasian, others were green, right? They are more, I would consider them alien, and somehow these experiences, there's a thread that ties all of them together, and to me, it's that there is a magical realm, and that we can participate with it if we so choose. Yeah.
So alien, not necessarily as a being from a starship, from outside of a solar system, let's say, or outside of this planet. And it's a small planet, it's a small system, right? But alien as the other, from a different field of perception, basically, right? So we don't know if it's a nature spirit, or maybe they are one and the same, or as you say, like it's like in all native beliefs, indigenous beliefs, mother spider, right? So the goddess is the creator, but she's also nature, and in esoteric Hinduism, she's called Prakriti, which basically she creates, but she's the creation. So it's very much kind of almost pantheistic version of a divinity. So then we're all connected, right? So the other is just basically something out of our field of perception. It doesn't have to be this technological being. We're just very much technologically minded at the moment, right? So
exactly. And I mean, like there is spirits within nature, such as the spirit of the tree itself or the spirit of the plant. But the elementals, some of the beings that are like the fairy folk, in that they may in fact be what we are now perceiving as the alien, or the alien visiting in a spaceship, because the experiences are very, very similar. And again, I always go back to Passport and Magonia, and then some of the work of my friend who's a researcher, Josh Kutchin, who is exploring and expanding on that, the commonalities between modern UFO experiences and experiences that people had with the Fae or the fairy folk, particularly in Celtic culture, going back centuries and centuries. The idea of changelings and beings that implant us with things. He's found examples in Irish folklore of people that are claiming that they had these experiences that are very similar to what we now think of as an alien implant.
So they were implanted, but what would they be implanted with, since they were not technologically savvy, right, in Celtic beliefs? I just wonder.
Well, it would be the same idea as with the modern alien implants. What we find is that it's usually some form of detritus or pebble, or it's something that traces down. And this is the same thing that they were saying, well, this was because the fairies didn't like you, or this was part of the fairy wind, and they would implant, and then people would have like a little bump or something, open it up, and it's, this. Well, now it's more, well, the aliens, have implanted me because they're following me or whatever they're doing, but it's the same thing. Like all these things have some natural organic material that doesn't necessarily have to be found out in another, because I mean, the cosmos is all pretty much made up of the same building blocks anyway. So it's not like it would be from another star system. It's just for us, like, we had discussed before, it's part of we're living, I think, in a modern mythology. So whether what this is what we're perceiving, I don't know, including seeing spaceships, which I did after my experience at 23. I had another experience 11 years later with what I would say looked to me like a structured spacecraft. But upon examining the experience, which again was with another person, we were out hiking, we weren't looking for UFOs, this thing just happened. But afterwards, and I talk about this in my book as well, afterwards I realized that for me, this experience I was kind of in a headspace at that time where I was moving away from magical thinking. I was moving away, and I was at a strange point in my life with my marriage at that time, and all of a sudden this thing appears, and it was almost as if a reminder to come back to that magical realm, that magical thinking. But I realized the idea that this is a spaceship sitting in the sky that just seemed to be bobbing along in the wind and then just disappear, like a kite. It was bobbing like a kite in the wind, and then it turned, and then it was like it was out of my line of sight or something. It just vanished in front of my eyes, and including the other witness. I realized that what I was seeing, in part, the idea that this is aliens coming from another galaxy, is probably driven by my desire for it to be so, because growing up with moon landings and Star Trek and all these things, and the idea of not wanting to be alone in this vast universe, that's the greater message. So what I saw, what I perceived, was not, and actually might have been what was there. I'm viewing it and perceiving it in a way, but that's not necessarily what it is. So part of my research now is looking at the symbolic content of these experiences and what drives them.
That's fascinating, but I also want to ask you then a very kind of straightforward question. So do you believe that when the spaceships and aliens in spaceships actually exist? So we are talking about the other that immediately exists. I think we could agree to this. I would call it like a spiritual beings, or maybe interdimensional beings, or nature spirits. I'm open to this. But do you think that also, that maybe some other beings from other solar systems, even galaxies, visiting us, who have technology or maybe mental abilities to do this? It doesn't have to be always about technology, right?
Yeah, well, I think that if there's a technology, it's probably driven by consciousness or their consciousness, if this is the case. Personally, the way the narrative runs about aliens coming to visit and they're doing little experiments and this and that really doesn't resonate with me. Okay. From my research but I vary, because these things are so strange. I hesitate to say absolutely no 100%. I'm just saying that if this is alien from another species of being that's somewhere else in the universe, it's going to be far more exotic than the basic story that we have.
Okay, yeah. Because also I just wanted to ask you, are you familiar with the work of, I'm sure you are, because you're more into this topic than I am, and you're much more educated on this one, Dr. Stephen Greer? Do you have any opinion about it? Because he's also kind of connecting spirituality with this. At least, he's doing Hindu mantras, and then people have experiences, right? Which are, sure, are spiritual experiences. It's basically, there's this white light, UFOs appeared, but for me, I think these are spiritual. This is how I would call it, a spiritual experience. But they say it's a UFO, right? So
it is. It's a spiritually driven UFO experience. And honestly, so with Stephen Greer as a person, he is a controversial figure. There's a lot of controversy surrounding him. But then that's true of a lot of religious figures.
That's true. Any guru, right?
Exactly. To beware the gurus, but the methodology does work. And people say, well, how do I have these experiences? And I say, well, probably the best way is that if you're actually open to having an experience, even if you're just mildly skeptical, but you're open enough to it, go to one of these locations. You might as well up your game a little bit and go to a place that's well known, such as the Min Lights, yes, which are in Australia, or the Stalin Lights in Norway. There are other places around the world that are paranormal hotspots. And if you go there and you go enough times, maybe 5-6 times, you're guaranteed pretty much you're going to see something. For me, it's fairly easy, because I have found through my practice, it's very easy for me to get into a trance state, or put myself in that shamanic mode, and then I can easily have experiences. But if you want to, and like I said, if you want to have an experience like that, it's fairly easy enough. And the methodology of Stephen Greer does work. I've tested it numerous times, and not just for myself, but for others. But like you said, it's a very spiritually driven approach, which may, you know, go against the people who want more nuts and bolts science type experiences. But it does work, even if the guru or the, you know, the guy has some controversy surrounding him, you know. But that's true of any guru, any person who's in that hierarchy position. You've always got to be using your skeptical mind a little bit and questioning the, you know, the person.
And I do not know him. I just saw his films, and he seemed, you know, like I could relate to his methodology, as you say. And I thought, and people did have experiences, so something, you know, happens there. It is interesting for me when I was reading, you know, Diana Pasuka's book, because the experiences that some of her experiencers, as it's called in UFO community, described for me were clearly spiritual experiences. So I think it's quite interesting how we just name the same experience in a different way. So when I had experiences with beings of light, and I had experiences like a portal opening in full, you know, in front of me, you know, I'm kind of exposing myself right now. And actually it was a very healing experience for me. I was about 19 years old, and I was going through extremely intense fear, you know, that I thought I was going to go mad. I was so fearful for reasons I'm not going to explain now. And this portion of light in my room opened, which, you know, couldn't physically be there because, you know, I was living in a high-riser, right, with my mother. It just opened, and it just told me, as they say, you know, in biblical language, almost, although I never read the Bible because I was brought up as a Catholic, so, you know, we never read the Bible. Do not be afraid. And I stopped being afraid. And this is what people say, that often both aliens and angels say. And it actually is extremely healing experience. And I was like in awe. I had the first full-on spiritual experience with that portal that appeared in my room. And, you know, I would say it was a spiritual experience, but some of these people in Diana Pasuka's book, they say that they had a UFO experience because they talk about orbs and, right, and lights, right? Sometimes appearing in our rooms, like what happened to me when I was 19. So
exactly. And I think that's why some people view the UFO experience through the lenses of angels and demons, particularly in the United States, because of the Christian, you know, background. You know, in their formative years, it's hard to not look at it that way or examine it that way. For me, I don't necessarily, but I do know that angels have been depicted as columns of light. And aliens as well appear in columns of light, and they do healing. So are the aliens the angels? Maybe. Maybe they are. You know.
I think it's very interesting. Yeah, and I'm completely open to this. I just am glad that they are there, and we occasionally have a contact with them, you know. So for me, it's a very rare experience, and I had it maybe 2-3 times in my life, maybe 3. Never in a spaceship form, but more like pillar of light or the portal. And they were always, in my case, positive experiences, you know. So I choose to call them spiritual experiences, but, you know, maybe they are not. And then I started to use a more different language, like interdimensional maybe experiences, but they were always benevolent, and I always felt better. Let's put it this way, you know, something shifted for the better for me, you know, after this experience, or I received a message, you know, so that, you know, to do something or not to do something. So this is really fascinating, and you say that you mostly connected to like folk stories and mythology in the past, right? It's Celtic mythology and Italian mythology, right? The experiences with the UFOs. So how could we finish this? Because it's really fascinating, you know, and I love sharing these experiences. But how would you, someone who would like to have this kind of experience, maybe connected more also because of this channel, you know, to the divine feminine, and also, you know, witchery or mystical or magical experience, what would you advise this person to to do, except for going to some famous spot, because especially now during the pandemic, you know, when nobody's going anywhere for a while, right? And we're in Australia, nobody's coming, and we are not going anywhere because we're completely isolated. So at the stage, right, our borders are closed. So in your own bedroom, in your own living room, what could we do?
Well, I would, if you have any access at all to nature, personally, I feel that my own magic is far more driven by nature or natural bodies of water, the trees. Even if you can just look out your window at the night sky and just open your heart to it. You know, maybe just ask, say, you know, I'm open to you. I would love to have a positive contact with the space, the aliens, the space beings, you know, and just open yourself up to it. Just ask, you know, being kind, I think, and being positive will help to drive a more positive experience back for yourself. So this would be my advice. Meditation, for some people, meditation comes easier than others, but if it doesn't come for you, if you can't meditate, that's fine. Just picture a positive experience or express your desire through your art. If you can paint, if you can draw, you know, sing. You know, I sing to the local spirits. I sing to the spirits of my house, and each day I have a little bit of a something that lets me know whether it's an item that's been moved out of place and then moved back, or I'm looking for something and then all of a sudden it appears for me. And I really, really in my heart know that this is because I do, you know, I'm open to something much greater to myself. Again, when it comes to the cosmic mother, I feel it's very beneficial to be beholden to something greater than just me, but also to the local spirits that surround myself and the spirits of my house. Do something nice for yourself within your home. These are all ways that we can connect to the sacred and connect to, you know, even from our own living room or from our own bedroom. There are different ways that and I discuss some of this in my book too, the tools of the witch, which the most important thing is the witch herself, right?
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. So would you also encourage people kind of spontaneous rituals? Because I actually, yeah, or you think there should be some specific incantations or just opening, did you say?
I think that there's a lot that can be borrowed from different spiritual traditions, which I have done. You know, not, you know, culturally misappropriating people, but I mean, there are you know, there are things that you can do to borrow and realize you're borrowing it and incorporate it into something that works for you, that comes from your heart. Magic is fueled from our inner self. And it's really what works for you. There's not one specific spell that I think will work for every single person. So I would say that, you know, we have like a lot of information now via the internet that we can look for different traditions. We can explore things. We can, you know, and if it works for us, if it feels intuitively to you like something that is nourishing you, that is good for you, that you feel good about, then you can explore that and expand upon it. My rituals, my best rituals, have all come about spontaneously. You know, it's something, I'm just in that zone, and I've put together my altar and I'm singing to the cosmic mother, and I feel good about it. And this is where the magic happens. And honestly, I have had a lot of results, and that's going to be part of the second book, Conjuring UFOs, that I'm currently. Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to this book. Thank you, Suzanne. That was a fascinating conversation, but I just realized that I kept you already longer than I promised I would. So thank you so much for this. And for everybody else who is going to be watching this interview, I'm going to leave a link to Suzanne's book. So, you know, I highly recommend it for you to read it. And also, if you like this video, please like it, and also subscribe to this channel, so it helps me to encourages me to, you know, interview interesting people here. And also, you know, what an intriguing topic. Thank you so much.